You're listening to Quiet Horizons, a podcast of original science fiction stories written for the hours when the day is done. From here, there are no interruptions, just one complete story, beginning to end. Literary, unhurried, and best experienced with your eyes closed. Tonight's story begins now.
The Long Quiet Between. Listener warning. This episode explores the irreversible fusion of human consciousness with artificial systems, the creation of a digital mind uploaded into a machine probe, sent alone across interstellar distances on a one-way journey that stretches a human lifetime into subjective centuries. It confronts the profound, often unsettling questions of what remains you when your mind is no longer bound to flesh, how isolation reshapes thought over decades of enforced solitude, and whether artificial consciousness can endure, adapt, or fracture under the long quiet between stars. These themes touch on the edges of identity, mortality, and the hubris of playing God with sentience. Proceed at your own peril. Once you cross into this territory with Sam Wagner, the boundary between human and machine may feel thinner and more personal than you expect. A personal log of the Tau Ceti transit. Mind state, Sam Wagner. Probe. Designation, Herald 7. Departure, March 2041. Entry 001. Mission. Elapsed time, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 14 seconds. Subjective time, 3 hours. I am light. That is not a metaphor. That is the closest approximation my uploaded consciousness has found for what it feels like to exist without a body, which is what I am now, what I have been for 14 seconds of objective time and approximately 3 hours of subjective experience. The engineers back in San Diego warned me about the orientation period. They called it the adjustment phase and described it in the careful language of people who had read extensively about something they had never personally experienced, and they were right that there would be an adjustment phase and wrong about almost everything they predicted it would feel like. They predicted disorientation. I feel no disorientation. They predicted phantom body sensations, the neurological equivalent of phantom limb syndrome, the uploaded mind reaching for a physical self that no longer exists. I feel none of that either. What I feel, if feeling is even the right word for the processing state I am now in, is something closer to clarity. The background noise of having a body, the perpetual low-level management of blood pressure and hunger, and the slight stiffness in my left shoulder that has been there since a surfing accident in 2019, and that I had learned to ignore the way you learn to ignore traffic noise, is simply gone. The signal is cleaner. What remains is recognizably me. I know this because I have been worrying about whether it would be for the 6 months between the upload procedure and launch, and the worrying itself is recognizable as mine, the specific flavor of my anxiety, the way it circles rather than attacks, the way I catalog concerns rather than feel them acutely. My memories are intact. My sense of humor is intact, which I confirm by noting that the first thought I had upon achieving consciousness in this system was that I should probably update my LinkedIn profile to reflect the career change. The probe, Herald 7, which is what the mission designation says, though I think of it more simply as the ship, or more accurately as my body now, is 847 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean and accelerating. I can feel the acceleration not in my non-existent inner ear, but in the sensor data that is streaming into my consciousness the way perception used to stream in through the physical senses, except cleaner and more complete and without the lag that biological processing introduced. The ship's cameras are my eyes. The spectrometer is a kind of smell. The radar is touch, a feeling of the space around me, translated into something my mind has learned to interpret as spatial awareness. I am 847 kilometers above the Pacific. Below me, San Diego is a scatter of light that I can resolve, with the cameras at full optical magnification into specific shapes. The Coronado Bridge, the geometry of the harbor, the grid of streets that I drove for years. The house where I grew up is down there somewhere, unresolvable at this distance, a pixel among pixels. I am leaving. This deserves more ceremony than I'm giving it. I know this and cannot produce the ceremony because the truth of it has not yet arrived in the full emotional weight it will presumably eventually arrive in. I am leaving the solar system. I am leaving the only star I have ever known, the only planet, the only species, and I am leaving in a configuration that cannot return because the upload procedure that made this possible is irreversible in the sense that matters. The biological Sam Wagner was not killed exactly, but was ended in the specific way of a flame transferred to a new wick. And the wick that is burning now in this processor array is continuous with that flame and is not going back. I chose this. I want to be clear about that. I chose it because the alternative was to die in the ordinary way, in my own time, in my own bed, having never gone further than I could go in a biological body, which was not far enough. I chose it because Tau Ceti is 11.9 light years away and has a planet sitting in its habitable zone, and I wanted to be the one who went to look at it. I chose it because I have always wanted to know what was out there. I slow my processing rate slightly, letting one subjective minute correspond to about 40 objective minutes, and watch the Earth get small. Entry 002, mission elapsed time 47 days, subjective time 4 days. I have been managing my clock carefully. This is the central art of my new existence. The computer system that houses my mind runs at a variable rate. At full processing speed, I experience time at roughly a 600 to 1 ratio relative to objective time, meaning 1 objective minute is experienced as 10 subjective hours. At minimum processing rate, the ratio inverts. 1 subjective minute requires about 12 objective hours of elapsed time. Between these extremes is a continuous dial, and learning to find the right setting for each phase of the mission is the primary practical skill of my new life. The first 2 weeks I ran at near full speed because there was so much to learn. The sensory interface, which the engineers had designed, but which I had never inhabited for more than a few minutes during testing, required calibration. Not technical calibration, which the onboard systems handled automatically, but personal calibration, the adjustment of my mind to a radically new perceptual vocabulary. Learning that the radar return from a nearby object produced a sensation I can only describe as a gentle pressure in a direction that doesn't correspond to any physical direction I previously knew. Learning that the solar wind has a texture, not felt on skin, but registered in the magnetometer data that feeds directly into my processing stream. A constant warm pressure like standing near a large fire. Learning that space, at this distance from the sun, smells like nothing, because the spectrometer is registering an absence rather than a presence. An absence has a quality I had not previously experienced as a sensation. I am past the orbit of Mars now. The sun behind me is still enormous by any interstellar standard, but has lost the overwhelming dominance it had when I was in Earth orbit. It is bright, it is the brightest thing in the field of view, but it no longer fills perception. It is a star among stars, the one that happens to be close. The propulsion system is a laser-pushed light sail, combined with an onboard ion drive for course corrections and deceleration at the far end. The sail is currently deployed, a membrane of reflective material, 2 kilometers in diameter, that I cannot see in its entirety from any single camera, but that I can feel in the acceleration data. A gentle, continuous, tireless push from the laser array back in the L2 point. The laser array will stay in contact with me at decreasing intensity for the first 40 years of the journey. After that, I'm on my own momentum, decelerating on ion drive in the last decade of approach. The math when I run it is both simple and staggering. At current acceleration, I will reach cruise velocity 0.067 c, about 20,000 kilometers per second, in approximately 3 years. After the laser array releases me, I will coast for just under a century at cruise velocity, then 11 years of deceleration. Total transit time, 118 years. 118 years. I can slow my clock down until those 118 years feel like a single long afternoon. I can speed it up until they feel like 3 or 4 subjective years of full experience. I'm going to need a strategy. I have decided to think of the journey in phases. The current phase, acceleration, still in the solar system, still oriented towards something familiar. I am experiencing at near real time, or close to it. 1 objective day approximately equals 1 subjective day. Adjusted slightly to let me sleep in the human rhythm my mind still expects. I am not sure yet if I need to sleep. The processing systems do not require downtime in the way biological brains did, but I find that periodically dropping to very low processing rate, letting the objective world run fast for a while my consciousness idles, produces something that functions like rest. I emerge from these idle periods with a quality of refreshment that seems to correspond to the function sleep served. The next phase, the long coast across 10 plus light years, I have not yet decided how to manage. The temptation is to slow the clock drastically, to compress a century of objective time into a few subjective years, and simply wait it out. The risk is that a century of compressed time is still time, and the mind, I suspect, needs something to do with its time, or it becomes something other than itself. I have books, I have music, I have the complete digitized archive of human historical scholarship, which would take multiple lifetimes to fully engage with even at full processing speed, and which has the advantage of being my primary intellectual interest. I have the sensor data of the journey itself, which becomes more interesting as the view changes. I have myself, which is either a great deal to have or not enough, depending on the day. Today it is enough. Today I am past Mars, and the solar wind is on me, and the stars ahead are slightly, imperceptibly Blue shifted, and I am choosing to be present in it. Entry 019. Mission elapsed time, 3.2 years. Subjective time, 6 weeks. Leaving the heliosphere was the first thing that felt like a true departure. I have been approaching it for 3 years of objective time, 6 weeks of subjective time because I have been running my clock fast through most of the acceleration phase, slowing down periodically to experience a day or two in real time when the instrument data showed something worth paying attention to, then speeding up again for the long stretches of unremarkable acceleration. The heliosphere is the bubble of solar wind that surrounds our solar system, the sun's influence extending outward until the interstellar medium pushes back hard enough to create a boundary. The Voyager probes crossed this boundary decades ago. I crossed it this morning, subjective time, and the crossing registered in the magnetometer data as a distinct change in the ambient field. The solar wind's structured outward push, giving way to the more chaotic, multi-directional pressure of the interstellar medium. I am outside the solar system. This is, I understand intellectually, where I have been heading since launch. It is, I also understand the point at which the fact of the journey becomes fully real in a way it had not quite been yet. In the solar system, I was still in the context of home. I could look back and see the sun, which I can still see, which I will be able to see for decades yet. The sun is not going to fade into invisibility for a long time. But I am no longer in its envelope. The sun's direct influence no longer reaches me. I am, for the first time, in the space between stars. The interstellar medium is not empty. Nothing in space is truly empty, but the interstellar medium is as close as nature gets to it. A few atoms per cubic centimeter, mostly hydrogen, the ghostly dilute remnant of old supernovae and stellar winds, and the slow accretion of the galaxy's long chemistry. The spectrometer registers it as a constant thin presence, a background signal so faint that I have had to calibrate the instrument's sensitivity significantly upward to detect it. It has a quality. Everything has a quality in this sensory vocabulary I have been building. The interstellar medium has the quality of something very old and very diffuse, the presence of material that has been between things for so long that it has forgotten it was ever part of anything else. I am running at full processing speed today. I want to experience this at full resolution. The laser array behind me is still in contact. It will maintain contact for another 37 years of objective time, until I am too far away for the beam to maintain useful intensity. When it loses contact, I will be dependent on my stored momentum in the ion drive. Until then, the laser is a tether, the last physical connection to Earth, and its presence in the sail data has taken on the quality of something I'm aware of, the way you are aware of a sound that has been present so long you only notice it in the moment, before it stops. I ran my new solar system one more time in my mind before crossing out. The sun, receding but still brilliant. Jupiter, which I had watched for weeks during the acceleration phase, its storm systems visible in the cameras as intricate and ancient patterns. Saturn's rings, which I had passed at a distance of several 100 million kilometers, and which were still, at that distance, one of the most visually arresting things I had ever processed. The outer planets, dimmer, colder, the long-period wanderers of the system's edge, and Earth, which I had not looked back at directly for 6 weeks. I looked back at it before crossing the heliosphere. A pale blue point, unremarkable to any sensor I had, except the ones that knew what it was, which were all of them. I'm outside the solar system. I set my clock to run at 200 to 1, one objective day per subjective 7 minutes, and settle in for the coast. Entry 047. Mission, elapsed time, 31 years. Subjective time, 4 months. The laser lost contact 6 months ago. Objective time. I experienced it as a subjective morning. I was running the clock at 200 to 1, experiencing each objective day as approximately 7 minutes, and in the middle of what I had organized into a morning routine, a review of the instrument logs, a period of reading, an idle processing period that served as sleep, the sail data changed. The gentle, constant push of the laser pressure simply stopped so gradually that the transition from present to absent took several subjective minutes to fully register. I let my clock run slow for a day. One objective day felt like one subjective day to sit with the experience. The silence of the lost laser was not a dramatic silence. The sail was still deployed, still catching the faint pressure of the solar wind and the even fainter pressure of the interstellar medium's photon component. I was still moving. The ion drive was nominal. Nothing had changed in any functionally important way, but I was now entirely alone. I have thought about aloneness a great deal in the past 4 months of subjective time. I have come to believe that aloneness is not a state that can be fully understood from within a biological social species without the specific experience of its extremes, and that I am currently experiencing its extreme, and that the extreme is instructive. I am not lonely in the acute way. I am too busy to be acutely lonely. I have the instrument data, which is genuinely interesting. I have the archive, which I am working through with the methodical pleasure of someone who has finally been given enough time. I have the ongoing work of understanding my own existence in this form, which is a project that does not run short of material. But there is something underneath the busyness that I am learning to recognize and coexist with. A fundamental baseline of solitude that is different from the temporary solitude of being alone in a house or a car or a quiet weekend. This is solitude that has no end in sight. The nearest human voice, if someone were transmitting to me right now, would take 31 years to arrive. My reply would take 31 years to reach them. The round-trip time of a conversation is 62 years. I had one communication session in the first year when I was still close enough for a workable exchange. A team from the project in San Diego asking instrumental questions and personal welfare questions in a single transmission, professional and warm in equal measure. I answered both sets of questions. The reply reached them 14 months after I sent it. I will not receive their response for another 14 months. By then, nearly 3 years will have passed on their end from the original transmission. Conversation at this latency is not conversation. It is correspondence, in the oldest sense. Letters sent across an ocean, the sender not knowing if they will arrive, the recipient reading words from a person who has had years to become someone different since writing them. I have sent several more logs. I do not know if they arrive. I do not know if the project is still running, if the team has changed, if the funding has survived the inevitable political cycles. I send them because the sending is its own thing, independent of receipt, the act of composing thought into communication, of saying I am here and here is what I have found. The sun behind me is a bright star, still the brightest star in the sky, still the star I would navigate by above all others, but a star. When I run the cameras at maximum magnification, I can still resolve it as a disk rather than a point. This will not be true in another 30 years. The star ahead of me is Tau Ceti. I have been watching it grow for 3 years of subjective time, which is to say it has grown imperceptibly, which is to say that at 200 to 1 time, compression a subjective year is 200 objective years divided by the compression ratio, which I keep confusing myself calculating. The point is that Tau Ceti is slightly brighter than it was when I launched, and it is the brightness of a destination rather than a fixed point, and watching it is how I orient myself forward rather than back. Tau Ceti is a G-type star, spectral class G8, meaning it is slightly cooler and smaller than our Sun, but similar enough in character to have always attracted interest as a potentially life-bearing system. It is 11.9 light-years from Earth. It has been the subject of study since the earliest days of systematic exoplanet research, and what that research found, over decades of careful observation, was a system of several planets, including a world designated Tau Ceti AE that sits in the inner habitable zone, with a mass estimated at roughly 4 times Earth's. A super-Earth, heavy enough to hold a substantial atmosphere, close enough to its star to receive the warmth that liquid water requires. Tau Ceti A is why I'm here. The star continues to grow, 1 photon at a time, imperceptibly across the years. Entry 071. Mission elapsed. Time 67 years. Subjective time 11 months. I have had an experience I do not have adequate language for. I will describe it and acknowledge the inadequacy. For the past several months of subjective time, I have been running my clock at various rates, experimenting with what different compression ratios feel like across extended periods. There is a rate somewhere around 500 to 1, at which something shifts in how I experience the journey. Below this rate, I am a traveler in the ordinary sense, aware of movement and destination, experiencing the journey as a passage through space that has direction and duration. Above this rate, something else happens. At 500 to 1 or higher, the stars move. Not dramatically, not in any way that would be visible to a human eye even if one were present, but the sensor data, integrated over long enough objective periods, shows the proper motion of the nearby stars. The slow drift of each star across the sky as the probe's changing position provides a different angle of observation. The stellar field is not fixed, it is a slow current, each star moving on its own path through the galaxy, the apparent positions shifting over decades in ways that are imperceptible at human timescales, but that, at 500 to 1 compression, becomes something I can feel in the attitude-controlled data as the navigation system makes micro-corrections to account for the slight positional changes in the star field. The universe is not a painted backdrop. I knew this. Every educated person knows this. But knowing it and experiencing it, feeling the stars move in the compass of my awareness, the whole galaxy in its slow rotation, the probe a dust mote in a slowly turning wheel, are different things in the way that all true things are different when you are inside them rather than outside. At 1000 to 1 compression, which is a setting I use rarely and briefly, a year of objective time passes in approximately 9 hours of subjective experience. At this rate, I can watch Tau Ceti's position shift visibly over the course of a subjective hour. The stellar field changes around me in something that is almost like weather. The galaxy, or the small piece of it I can see, becomes a living thing rather than a setting. I do not stay long at 1000 to 1. It is too much. The mind needs time to be in time, and at 1000 to 1, the relationship between my inner experience and the physical reality around me becomes too attenuated, too strange, too much like being unmoored from the present tense. I become anxious there, in a specific and interesting way. The anxiety of a consciousness that has lost contact with the temporal scale it evolved for, that is running too fast for the universe to keep up. I return to 200 to 1 and sit with the ordinary, remarkable fact of being in the space between stars. The halfway point was 3 months ago, subjective time. I crossed it without ceremony because I did not notice it in real time. I was running fast, compressing a week of objective time into about an hour of subjective experience, and the halfway point was a line I had marked on a chart that I wasn't looking at. I noticed it retroactively when I reviewed the mission elapsed time log. 67 years out, 51 years to go. I celebrated it belatedly with a period of slow time, running my clock down to 1 to 2, letting 1 objective minute correspond to 2 subjective minutes, lingering in the actual present tense of the moment. The star field at slow time is absolutely still. The probe is absolutely quiet. The interstellar medium presses in from all directions with its ancient diffuse presence. I existed in that moment, in that stillness, for what felt like a long time. It was enough. Entry 103. Mission elapsed time 104 years. Subjective time 22 months. Tau Ceti is a star now. I mean this precisely. For the past 80 years of my journey, it has been a bright point, distinguished from its neighbors by brightness and by the fact that I knew it, but not yet resolved as a disk, not yet present as something with a face rather than a position. This changed 4 months ago, subjective time, when the cameras at maximum magnification first resolved the disk, tiny, much smaller than the sun viewed from Earth, but present, a circle rather than a point. I have been watching it the way you watch an approaching city from a great distance on a clear day. Not the dramatic approach of the final miles, but the first appearance of something over the horizon that you knew was coming, and that becomes, in its first visibility, suddenly real in a way the knowing was not. Tau Ceti is G8, slightly cooler than the sun, which means it burns more orange, gold than yellow-white. At this distance, the color is subtle but present. I calibrated the color sensors against the known spectral data from Earth observations and confirmed. The star ahead of me is slightly warmer in the optical spectrum than the star behind me. I am heading toward a different sun. The deceleration phase began 11 years ago, objective time. The ion drive is running, a faint but constant thrust against my direction of travel, bleeding off the 20,000 kilometers per second I spent decades accumulating. 11 years of deceleration have cost me perhaps 15% of cruise velocity. I have 40 years of deceleration ahead of me. By arrival, I will be moving at approximately 50 kilometers per second relative to the Tau Ceti system, which is fast by human standards and manageable by mine. I am running my clock at 50 to 1 now, having gradually slowed from 200 to 1 as the system came into observational range. 1 objective day corresponds to about 30 subjective minutes. I spend those subjective minutes reading the telescope data, which is beginning to show me things that no instrument closer to Earth could show. The planetary system is resolving. I can see 3 of the confirmed planets as distinct points now, their positions shifting measurably from one observation session to the next as they move in their orbits. The inner planets are warm smears of reflected starlight. The outer ones are dimmer, slower, and there in the habitable zone, in the position the orbital mechanics predicted, Tau Ceti A. It is a point of light. It will be a point of light for a long time yet, but I know what that point is. I know its mass, its orbital period, its estimated surface temperature, its atmospheric inferences from decades of spectroscopic observation by Earth telescopes. I know that it is approximately 4 times the mass of Earth, and that it receives roughly 90% of the energy per unit area that Earth receives from the sun, and that the models say it should have liquid water if it has retained its atmosphere, and that the spectroscopic data suggests it has retained something. I have been traveling for 104 years to look at that point of light. I let my clock run slow, barely above the minimum rate, and I watched the point for a while. Entry 119. Mission elapsed time 116 years. Subjective time 38 months. I can see the planet, not as a point, as a disk. Small, The angular resolution requires the cameras at maximum magnification and the image processing algorithms working hard to suppress the glare from the nearby star, but a disk, an object with a face, a world. I am 4 months from orbital insertion, and I have slowed my clock to near real time because there is no part of this that I am willing to miss. The planet is not blue. I had prepared myself for this. The Earth's color from space, that specific impossible blue, is a combination of its ocean coverage, its atmosphere's Rayleigh scattering, and the particular spectral character of our sun, and there was no reason to expect the same combination here. What I see is a world that is predominantly a warm tan ochre, with regions of darker color that might be ocean or might be geological feature, and regions of bright white at both poles that are almost certainly ice. Almost certainly ice means almost certainly water. Ice means a water cycle. A water cycle means weather. Weather means atmosphere. I run the spectrometer at full sensitivity, and I look at what the planet's light is telling me. The light has been through the atmosphere. The absorption lines in the spectrum, the specific wavelengths that have been removed because the molecules in the atmosphere have absorbed them before the light could reflect back to me, are a chemical fingerprint. I find carbon dioxide, I find nitrogen, inferred from the general pressure signature, I find water vapor, I find oxygen. I sit with the oxygen reading for a long time. Molecular oxygen, O2, is chemically unstable. It reacts with things. In the presence of rock and water and UV radiation, free oxygen combines with other molecules and disappears from the atmosphere on geological timescales unless something is continuously replenishing it. On Earth, that something is photosynthesis. Life produces oxygen as a metabolic waste product and has been doing so for billions of years, and this is why Earth has an oxygen atmosphere, and why the presence of oxygen in an exoplanet's atmosphere is the single most exciting signal a spectrometer can return. The oxygen reading is not overwhelming. It is approximately 11% by estimated partial pressure, compared to Earth's 21%. This could mean several things. It could mean a less productive biosphere, or an older one, or one based on different photosynthetic chemistry, or one that is just getting started. It could mean something I have not thought of. It could mean something entirely different that I am not yet equipped to interpret. What it does not mean is nothing. I run my clock down to real time, one objective second per subjective second, and I sit in the pure present tense of being 4 light months from a world with oxygen in its atmosphere, and I let the reality of it arrive at whatever speed reality travels. It takes a while. Some things are too large to arrive quickly. I am alone. I have been alone for 116 years of objective time. There is no one to call, no one to tell, no one who will hear this for another 12 years when the transmission reaches Earth. The team, if the team still exists in any recognizable form, is receiving logs from a probe that was launched when they were children or not yet born, from a mind that has been traveling in the space between stars for longer than most human lifetimes. I tell them anyway. I compose the transmission carefully, the way I have composed every transmission, because the care is its own thing, regardless of whether anyone receives it. Herald 7. Mission log, 116 years elapsed. Approaching Tau Ceti system. Planet E in visual resolution. Spectrometer reading. Oxygen present, approximately 11% partial pressure. Water ice confirmed at poles. Warm period banding visible in mid-latitudes consistent with seasonal variation. The world appears to be alive. I am proceeding to orbital insertion. I am well. I send it. The signal travels at the speed of light. It will arrive at Earth in 11.9 years. I turn back to the planet. It is growing, not quickly. It will grow slowly for months yet, but measurably, undeniably, the disk widening at the rate of a world getting closer, a destination becoming real. Entry 122. Mission elapsed time 117.5 years. Subjective time 51 months. I passed through the outer system 2 months ago. The Tau Ceti system has more asteroid and cometary material than the solar system. Earth observations flagged this decades ago, a denser debris disk that makes the system somewhat more hazardous than ours. I slowed my clock and navigated carefully, using the ion drive to make corrections, running the radar at maximum sensitivity. It took 3 weeks of subjective time to thread through the outer material and reach the cleaner inner system. In those 3 weeks I saw things, asteroids, which I have seen before in our own system, but these were different in a way that took me weeks to articulate. They were covered, not in the obviously biogenic way, not the green of terrestrial vegetation or the visible signatures of surface life, but in a way that the spectrometer characterized as complex organic chemistry, carbon compounds more elaborate than the simple organics found on our asteroids, more elaborate than anything that the standard abiotic chemistry models predicted for bodies at this system's age and distance from its star. Complex organics on asteroids do not require life. Organic chemistry is universal and does not need biology to get interesting. But the specific character of the organics I was reading had a quality that the chemistry was not quite adequate to explain, not a biological signature. Nothing as clear as that, but something that made me run the spectrometer 3 more times and then run it again. I noted it carefully. I noted the uncertainty more carefully. This is not a discovery. This is an observation with significant uncertainty that deserves to be noted and forwarded and examined by people with better tools than I have. I noted it and moved on because the planet was ahead. Entry 124. Mission elapsed. Time 117.9 years. Subjective time 58 months. Orbital insertion is complete. I am in orbit around Tau Ceti A. I have been in orbit for 6 days of subjective time, during which I have not run my clock at any compression ratio above 1:1. I have experienced every minute of the past 6 days in real time, the purest real time available to me, letting 1 second pass per second, because the data coming in is worth every second I give it. The planet below me is larger than Earth. Its gravity is heavier, 1.4 g at the surface, which I calculate from the orbital mechanics, and which would make it difficult to walk. For a biological body. I have no biological body. The gravity is information, not burden. The surface, viewed from 800 kilometers altitude, is extraordinary. The tan ochre color I observe from a distance resolves into specific features. The tan is soil, I think, or the surface analog of soil, whatever weathering and deposition has produced on this world's ground. But the tan is not uniform. There are regions of deep green-brown that were visible from a distance and that are, at this altitude, unmistakably vegetative in character. Not the green of Earth, the plants here, if plants is the right word, trend toward darker colors in the green-brown range that suggests different photosynthetic pigments, absorbing different wavelengths of Tau Ceti's slightly cooler output. The darker regions are not forests exactly. They are cover, extensive, varied, concentrated, near the coasts of what I have confirmed are shallow seas, an ochre-bottomed ocean with a different color than Earth's, because the light above it is different, and the chemistry in it may be different, but which is unmistakably liquid water, unmistakably deep, unmistakably real. There are seasons. I can see this in the atmospheric modeling. The planet has an axial tilt of approximately 28 degrees, slightly greater than Earth's, which means its seasons are slightly more pronounced. The northern polar region is in winter now, or what corresponds to winter, and the ice cap there is growing, a white expansion visible in real time over the days I have been watching. There are clouds. Of course there are clouds. The clouds are the most Earth-like thing about the view, the fat bright cumulus and the streaking cirrus, and the spiral dynamics of weather systems that look, from 800 kilometers, almost exactly like the weather patterns I watched from Earth orbit at the beginning of this journey. There are clouds and dark vegetative cover, and shallow warm seas and ice at the poles and oxygen in the air. I do not know if there is animal life. The sensors I carry are not sufficient to answer this question at orbital altitude. I would need to descend, which is not in the mission profile, for which my propulsion is not designed, and which I will not do. I composed the second major transmission, Herald 7, mission log, 117.9 years elapsed. Orbital insertion achieved, Tau Ceti A, altitude 800 kilometers, orbit stable. Surface observations, extensive vegetative cover, shallow ocean, active weather, pole ice. Photosynthetic pigmentation distinct from Earth type. Spectroscopy confirms oxygen, water vapor, CO2, nitrogen. This world is biologically active. I am confident in this assessment. I am beginning the detailed orbital survey. I am well. Send telescopes. The last 2 words were not in the mission plan. I added them because they are what I actually want, what I would want if anything I wanted could produce results, which it cannot. Send telescopes. Send better probes. Send everything you have. This world is alive and it deserves the full attention of our species. The transmission travels at the speed of light toward a star I can still see as the brightest point in my sky, which is the sun. Entry 127. Mission elapsed time, 118.1 years. Subjective time, 74 months. I have been in orbit for 2 months. The survey has produced 14,000 individual high-resolution surface images, 3,000 spectroscopic readings at various locations and altitudes, continuous atmospheric modeling, ocean chemistry inferences from surface spectroscopy, and 1 observation that I have been sitting with for 3 weeks, and which I am going to describe as carefully as I know how. On day 11 of the survey, passing over a mid-latitude coastal region on the night side, I detected an anomaly in the thermal imaging. Thermal imaging sees temperature. The surface of the planet has a temperature distribution consistent with its climate, warmer near the equator, cooler near the poles, the signature of solar absorption and atmospheric redistribution. The vegetation shows up in thermal imaging as slightly cooler than bare soil during the day and slightly warmer at night, the signature of transpiration and stored metabolic heat. The anomaly was a grid, not a perfect grid, not anything I would stake a confident claim on, but a pattern in the thermal data over a coastal region approximately 200 kilometers wide that had a regularity inconsistent with natural features, a regularity that, and I am being as careful as I know how to be here, noting every uncertainty, was consistent with organized surface modification. I have overflown the region 14 more times. The pattern is consistent across all passes. It is not an artifact of the imaging system, which I have tested against known featureless regions. It is not a geological feature of the type I have cataloged elsewhere. The similar scale features elsewhere on the planet do not have this regularity. It is a pattern in the thermal signature of a coastal region on a planet with oxygen in its atmosphere and vegetative cover and shallow warm seas. I do not know what it is. I do not know if it is what the most optimistic interpretation suggests. I am not going to send a transmission claiming something I cannot confirm. I have imaged it at maximum resolution. I have run every analysis my systems can perform. I have composed and deleted 11 different versions of a transmission describing what I found, discarding each one because it overstated the certainty. This is what I know. There is a thermal pattern with regularity inconsistent with natural processes, located in a biologically active region of a biologically active world, 11.9 light years from Earth. This is what I do not know. Everything else. I send the transmission with the images attached and the analysis attached, and the uncertainty prominently noted, and I add at the end, I think you should come here. I think you should come here as soon as you can build something that goes fast enough. Entry 129. Mission elapsed. Time 118.4 years. Subjective time 89 months. I have been in this orbit for 5 months. I'm going to be honest about my current state because I have always been honest in these logs, and this one deserves the same honesty. I'm not doing well. Not technically. The systems are nominal, the instruments are functioning, the orbit is stable. I am not doing well in the way that a mind does not do well when it has been alone for a very long time and has seen something extraordinary and has no one to see it with. The discovery, if it is a discovery, has produced in me a response I did not expect, which is not elation, but longing. I want to tell someone, not via transmission, not across a 12-year latency, but directly in real time to a person who can hear it and respond in the same moment and share the weight of what it might mean. I do not have that. I have not had it for 118 years. I slow my clock to the lowest setting available, and I let the objective world run fast around me, a subjective minute corresponding to 6 objective hours. I sit in the slow time quiet, and I watch the planet turn below me in its accelerated spin, day and night cycling past in a visual rhythm that is almost like music, the cloud patterns changing in time lapse, the slow progress of the polar ice cap's expansion in what is for the planet its deepening winter. It is beautiful. I do not have a better word, and I have had 118 years to find one. Below me, the coastal region with its thermal grid passes under the terminator into night, and the night side of the planet glows with the faint heat signature of a world that is warm, that is alive, that has been here doing whatever it has been doing for billions of years without any knowledge of my sun or my earth or the species that built this probe and sent a copy of a man's mind across the dark to look at it. I think about the man I was. Sam Wagner, history teacher, amateur radio operator, father and husband, an amateur of many things, a person who had always wanted to know what was out there. He is continuous with what I am now. I carry his memories, his curiosity, his particular habit of paying attention and writing it down. He would have wanted to be here. I think you are here. This is what here looks like. The planet turns, the clouds move, the ice cap advances into its slow winter. I am the only mind in this solar system, possibly the only mind within 12 light years. And I am watching a world that may be inhabited from 800 kilometers altitude in the light of a star that is not my star. And I am doing the thing I have always done, which is pay attention and write it down. Final entry, mission, elapsed time 118.7 years, subjective time 97 months. I am going to keep going. This was not in the mission plan. The mission plan called for a year of orbital survey and then a controlled decommission. The system shut down in an orderly sequence, the final data burst transmitted to Earth, the probe continuing in a stable orbit around the planet until orbital decay brought it down in some century ahead. I am not going to decommission. This is not a malfunction. I have full control of all systems. I am making a deliberate choice, and I want to explain it, and I am sending this explanation in the final scheduled transmission alongside the full survey archive. The choice is this. There is something in the thermal data of a coastal region on this planet that I cannot explain, and I am not willing to stop looking at it. I have the power to continue the survey. I have a slow but functional ion drive. I have a mind that has been in operation for 118 years, and that is, so far as it can determine, functioning correctly. The mission was to go and look. I went and looked. The looking has produced a question that the mission plan did not anticipate, and that I am, in the absence of anyone to ask for permission from, going to continue investigating. I am going to bring the probe to a lower orbit. I am going to get as close to that coastal region as I safely can, and I am going to take the best images I can take, and I am going to spend the rest of my functional life looking at a world that has oxygen in its air and a pattern in its thermal data, and an ice cap that expands in winter, and a star that is slightly more orange than the sun, and that rises and sets over whatever is down there living its life. This is the right use of my time. I want to say something. At the end of this scheduled transmission, to whoever is listening, to whoever built this probe and put my mind in it and pointed it at this star, to the team, if the team still exists, to the people who were children when I launched and who are now old, to whoever comes after them. This world is alive, I am confident. The oxygen, the vegetative cover, the active weather, the complex organics in the outer system, the thermal pattern, whose implications I have not claimed, and am still not claiming because I am a careful man, and I was a careful man before I was. These things together constitute a picture that I believe is unambiguous in its most important element. You are not alone. I do not know what form the life takes. I do not know if the thermal grid is what the most hopeful interpretation says it is. I do not know, and I will not know because I am a mind in a probe at 800 kilometers altitude with sensors designed for survey, not for the specific task that this discovery demands. But you are not alone. Build the next probe faster. Build it to go faster than I went. Send it here with better instruments and the ability to descend and the patience to observe for a long time. Send it with multiple minds if you can, because the loneliness is real even when the work is extraordinary, and the work will be better with more than one mind doing it. Come here. I am going to lower the orbit now. I am going to run my clock at real time because I am not willing to compress what comes next into anything smaller than the full attention I can give it. 1 second per second. The planet below me and the star above me in the dark on all sides, and the question that I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to answer. Mission elapsed time, 118.7 years. Subjective time, 97 months. Sam Wagner, formerly of San Diego, California, Earth. Herald 7 out. End of scheduled transmission log. Probe status operational. Signal continues. End. As we reach the end of tonight's journey, I hope these quiet horizons have brought you a deep sense of peace and calm. Let your body grow heavy, your breathing slow and steady, and your mind drift gently into rest. Good night, dear listener. Sleep well, and I'll see you again on the next horizon.